Hola. Hi, I'm Birgit. Welcome to Brooklyn. And thank you, cultura, for Myra, Carmen, and Andrea for making it possible for me to talk about my work today. As an introduction, I wanted to say that for undergrad, I went to a film school where I learned all aspects of film production. So I learned cinematography, editing, screenwriting, directing. And I worked on many student live action short film productions. And I realized, so the way they work is you write the screenplay, you cast the actors, you make decisions about wardrobe and locations, you pick the cinematographer, and when when your shoot date comes, it's very stressful. You just think about how much money you're spending, and I kind of, in the process of helping other people make these films, realized that it was a circumstance for me to be creative in, or a good process for me to be creative with. So I taught myself how to animate, and when I'm making an animation, the only limiting factor is how much time I want to spend. So I'm not relying on other people, and I'm not relying on so usually that suits me quite well. And the one thing, though, that I really liked about film school was working with lots of other people, collaborating, making things together. And then, so now I work in many media. I work in animation, I work in sculpture, I work in drawing, and often I collaborate with people. Sometimes it's many people, sometimes it's just a few people. Usually the main tool that all the projects have in common is right over there. It's a tiny little computer that's very flexible. I have 3 of them. They're kind of cheap. They're called the Mac Mini, and they can do everything I want to do. So this one here is connected to this monitor, and I will show you some video in a minute. The other one in my office is connected to another monitor, and I make stuff on it. And sometimes I use a drawing tablet. Okay, so that's the basic setup. So a few years ago, I started a project with 2 collaborators. One of them is holding this telephone, and it's Rick. Hi, Rick. And the other one is Alejandro Almanza Pereira, who's in Guadalajara. And one day Alejandro was visiting New York, and he said, there's a church in Chiapas that's in a lake. And so we looked it up, this church, and we found this image amongst several other images. And we immediately decided that what we needed to do was to take a tour of the church that you couldn't see, the part of the church you couldn't see, the part that's underwater. And we also decided that we would all that would be based on whatever we found here. So that was the structure of the exhibition. There was a dam that the Mexican government built in the mid-60s, and it flooded this whole valley, And the whole history of this valley is underwater, including this church. And the traces of the people who used to live in this valley are now drowned. So before we went to go here and shoot underwater footage, we went to the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, and there we found sculpture. And what was interesting about this sculpture is that it didn't have a label. So much like the history that was lost when this was drowned, we also couldn't really find out that much about this sculpture. When we first approached the sculpture from the front, it had these giant teeth and it looked like a very scary animal. But then when you walked around it, it just basically looked like a little doggy asking for a treat, like, give me a treat, give me a treat. So we kind of adopted this as our guide to all the video footage that we shot in Chiapas. And let's see if this works. Okay, so the video that we made for the exhibition started like this. And after that, we traveled to Chiapas, where we shot so much video. And for the exhibition that we eventually made at the Clementa Center in New York, I then made a video with this animated character over it, and it was 20 minutes long, so that's a little bit too much to watch on a phone and an Instagram story. So we're just gonna watch a tiny clip of the underwater part, since that's what the whole trip was aimed towards. Are you ready?
Est maculata, et non sunt bene placite subsanationes injustum. Dominus solus sustinentibus se in dia veritatis et justitia. Dona iniquorum non probat altissimus, nec respicit in oblationes iniquorum, nec in multitudine sacrificiorum eorum propitiabitur peccatis. Qui offered sacrificium ex substantia pauperum, quasi qui victimat filium in conspectu patris sui. panis et gentium vita pauperum est, qui de fraura il homo sanguis.
So the video part of this project is still evolving. More is coming. But there was a fork in the road. We came across another kind of ruin that was equally fascinating to me. And we found a very great example on this construction site. And it was basically by the side of the road were these pillars where somebody had started building their dream project and they hadn't finished. So there was this one. There were many of these pillars that were just standing in the weeds. And I took the pictures somewhere. And I printed the pictures I just showed you on watercolor paper and sepia toned them. So this is basically my starting ground. And then we found another site that was even more dramatic, a construction site that had been abandoned. And this one was meant to be vacation houses, but they only got as far as putting up the structure for the gate. So what I decided that I wanted to do was to design characters who something had gone wrong in their life, or maybe it was something small, like why can't I ever be on time, or maybe it was something big, like a virus is coming to kill me, and they were going to use these structures to balance themselves or to rectify the trauma that they had experienced. So so I drew them onto the printouts that I made, and they all have a line of text with them. So this one says the virus, and so basically when I make these, I draw the character first, and I sort of choose which structure to use to help this character out, to balance with. So there's also these say current events are happening right now. And they became a real formal problem. Like I couldn't really figure out how to make them look like they're stabilizing on this structure until I put this ridiculous river of glitter on here. And then suddenly it worked. So sorry, I had to use glitter to make it work. I apologize for anybody who's offended by that. So this one is one that I actually made in Guadalajara, and it's called I've Been Up 4 Days Trying to Get Ahead. And it with this one, it sort of became obvious that some of these were very sculptural, and that they were trying to solve sculptural problems, like how do you build a skeleton for a figure. So some of them eventually become sculptures. And then, but some of them, like this one, some of them just become very flat graphic solutions. So every time I make one of these, I kind of have to contend with how do I combine them? How will this character use the structure to sustain them and to prop them up? And there are, at this point, I've been doing this since last summer. So in my hallway downstairs, where there's really bad internet connection, there are 3 walls that are totally full with these. So eventually I have to make some choices, but not yet. Yeah, so this is what I had prepared, and now if you guys have any questions, please ask me questions.
There was a question earlier that asked if the voiceover was in Latin.
Yes, the voiceover was in Latin. Rick, can you explain about the guy?
This is your studio talk, not mine, so...
Rick found a guy who was a minister who could perform this sermon in Latin.
It's a reading from the book of Ecclesiastes in the Roman Catholic Bible. It is the phrase that Bartolomé de las Casas used on the Pentecost sermon when he excoriated the conquistadors of Havana. I think it was Havana at the time. And and since he was also the head of the Dominican order and the Bishop of Chiapas when the Templo Santiago Quechua was built. So that's the connection.
Any other questions?
Just a lot of people waving.
Hi. I wish it could all be here, or maybe I wish I could be there.
Shall we call it?
I don't know. If nobody wants to say anything, then maybe we just call it.
Thanks for attending, everybody.
Thanks for coming. See you later.
Oh, wait, we have a question. What happened with the church in your work? Will you use it in some way?
The church, it was beginning, so there will be more projects about landscapes that have been drowned by, most of them by human activity. The church will be one of them. Possibly the next one will be working and has since been emptied out by the city. So all the buildings have been demolished and the neighborhood is going back to how it was original.
And we did, just to be clear, we did use the church extensively in the video. And then in the exhibition at the Clemente Center, there were photos of the church. There was also a long archaeological study of the entire Malpaso Valley, of which the church was just one entry out of more than 100. There were a ton of real antiquities sites about it. So the church kind of became a symbol of everything else that had been lost in that valley. I also see Alejandro, you have a question? You said there is a question. Here, while people are drafting their questions, have a view of Brooklyn. Do 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 do. It is in Chiapas.
Can I talk?
Yes. Is it in Chiapas? Where in Chiapas?
It's about an hour west of Tuxtla. It's a big reservoir that you can drive to from Tuxtla, and the site of the church is on the north end of the reservoir that was created by several in the 1960s.
The Rio Grijalva.
Yeah.
Okay. He says, what's the motor of your search for these kind of places? You visited Temacapulín when you were here in Guadalajara.
Well, I think what's really interesting is this idea that humans are rearranging landscapes, and that often histories that humans have created, or even the original fauna, has been erased. And so the question is, as this is becoming more commonplace, that the water is rising for all kinds of reasons, the question is about this loss of history. We tell these stories. Is it possible to create answers for the future?
Anybody else have any questions? Give you a view of Brooklyn again. Seemed to work last time. Pepe writes, where is your work heading now? What other places do you aim to visit to continue this process?
So probably, well, we had a whole plan. Like many people, we had many plans for this year. One of them involved shooting a town in the Italian Alps where a similar dam had been built. But in a terrible disaster, the dam collapsed and wiped out cities below it. So we really wanted to go there, and then we wanted to go to tour to do a show at Quadro in August.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that any of this is happening currently, but first, the thing that we know we can reach is the neighborhood in Staten Island, so we will be doing work there first.
Ed Viloria says, thank you, I am Mexican and I've been to Chiapas and Tuxtla but never knew about the church. And then another comment, somebody saying, hi Mark, I think saying, those abandoned construction sites that you found in Mexico, that means a corrupt period of the government.
Yes. And the question is, can you build something on corruption that can be used again in other purposes?
Because in a sense, you said the characters are kind of corrupted in some way.
Yeah, well, they've been damaged.
The front cover of a Led Zeppelin album. Say thank you.
Seems like maybe you'll all have run out of questions, and I just want to thank you all for coming to Brooklyn today, and thank you for Rick for holding the phone for half an hour. I'm sure his arm is getting tired, and I hope I'll see you all soon. Bye. So safe.